The war already lost. The war had been lost long before the last alarms began to scream. Admiral Zalthrin stood motionless on the command dais of Coalition Bastion K-17, his scaled hands clasped behind his back as another star vanished from the tactical holomap. One moment it glowed green, defended, supplied, alive. The next, it dimmed to red, then black. Another world gone. Around him, officers from a dozen species worked in exhausted silence. There were no shouted orders anymore. No optimism left to manufacture. Every being on the bridge knew the truth. The Krell Dominion was no longer advancing. It was finishing the job. The Krell had come from a region of space thought uninhabitable. Their civilization forged on a stable paradise world where evolution had favored efficiency over resilience. Their ships were elegant, their formations mathematically perfect, their tactics refined through centuries of controlled conflict. Against them, the Galactic Coalition's diversity, once its strength, had become a weakness. Too many doctrines, too many moral limits, too many rules. Zalthrin watched the delayed combat feed flicker to life. A Coalition cruiser, shields already failing, tried to withdraw from an engagement zone. The Krell did not pursue immediately. They waited, adjusted vectors, and fired once. The cruiser split in half. No escape pods launched. The Krell never targeted them. They did not need to. Enemy fleets converging on Bastion K-17. An aide reported quietly. Estimated arrival, 6 standard hours. 6 hours. Zalthrin did not acknowledge the report. He already knew. Bastion K-17 was the last functional command station between the Krell Armada and the Coalition core worlds. Its defenses were depleted, its fighter wings reduced to a handful of barely operational craft. Even if every weapon fired perfectly, it would only delay the inevitable. Across the bridge, Commander Sevet, a mammalian strategist with fur dulled by stress and lack of sleep, hesitated before speaking. "Admiral," Sevet said, voice low, "we have one option remaining." Several heads turned. Zalthrin slowly faced him. "We have exhausted our options," the Admiral replied, "unless you intend to rewrite physics." Sevet swallowed. "There is one channel we have not used." Silence followed. Not the comfortable kind, but the sharp, fearful stillness of prey sensing a predator. Zalthrin's eyes narrowed. "That channel is forbidden." "Yes," Sevet agreed. "But so is extinction." A ripple of unease spread across the bridge. Officers exchanged glances, mandibles twitching, crests lowering. They all knew what Sevet meant. Humanity. The word itself carried weight. Not fear exactly, but something adjacent to it. Humanity was classified under the Coalition's most severe threat designation, Deathworld species. A civilization born on a planet with crushing gravity, volatile climate systems, rampant disease, and an ecosystem that had tried, relentlessly, to kill them. Humans had survived anyway. They were not expelled from the Coalition. They had never been invited. "They reject our doctrines," one officer muttered. "They fight without restraint. They escalate conflicts beyond necessity," another added. "Their history is nothing but war layered upon war." Zalthrin knew the reports. Every admiral did. Humanity deployed weapons designed not merely to defeat enemies, but to erase their capacity to ever rise again. They embraced tactics the Coalition considered barbaric, sacrificial maneuvers, psychological warfare, overwhelming force without negotiation. And yet, they are undefeated, Sevet said quietly. Not because they are stronger, but because they refuse to accept loss. The Admiral turned back to the holomap. Red markers surrounded the station now, a tightening noose of Krell precision. The Coalition's ideals, restraint, proportionality, coexistence, had brought them here. Ideals did not stop annihilation. "What is the status of the Deathworlder channel?" Zalthrin asked. Sevet hesitated only a fraction of a second. "Operational. Long-range quantum burst. It bypasses Coalition encryption safeguards." In other words, Zalthrin said, "if we activate it, we invite them without conditions." "Yes, Admiral." Another explosion rocked the station. Somewhere deep within its structure, a reactor failed. The lights flickered, then steadied. Zalthrin made his decision. "Prepare the signal," he said. "No formalities. No demands." Sevet's eyes widened. "Admiral, what should the message contain?" Zalthrin considered the question, then shook his head. "The truth," he said. "For once." The recording began. Zalthrin stepped in a frame, his uniform scorched, his posture rigid with exhaustion. "This is Admiral Zalthrin of the Galactic Coalition," he said. "We are losing. Our fleets are shattered. Our worlds are burning. The Krell Dominion will exterminate us within days." He paused, something unfamiliar tightening in his chest. "We require aid," he continued. "No restrictions. No treaties. No limits. If you answer, we accept the consequences." The signal was transmitted. For a moment, nothing happened. The bridge held its breath as the quantum burst vanished into the void, toward the dark, distant territories humanity called home. Minutes passed. Then, a single alert chimed. "Incoming transmission." The display flickered, resolving into plain text. No insignia, no greeting, no delay. Coordinates received. Fleet en route. Zalthrin felt a chill ripple through his scales. The war was not over, but it had just changed. The ones who answer. Human space did not look like civilization as the Galactic Coalition understood it. There were no radiant trade nexuses or ceremonial stations gleaming with diplomatic insignia. Instead, the stars beyond the Perseus Veil were crowded with shipyards wrapped in armor, sensor arrays layered upon sensor arrays, and patrol routes drawn not for beauty or efficiency, but for survivability. Even the void seemed tense, as if expecting violence. The SOS reached Human Fleet Command as a priority red alert, bypassing civilian networks and treaty filters that no longer mattered. Admiral Elias Ward was already awake. He stood in the center of the command pit aboard the HFS Indomitable, a battleship whose hull bore the scars of half a dozen wars that never made it into Coalition history books. The alert finished playing. No emotional appeal. No formal plea. Just coordinates. And surrender of conditions. Ward exhaled slowly. Around him, officers waited in disciplined silence. None of them looked surprised. "So," Ward said at last, his voice calm and level, "they finally ran out of better options." Fleet intelligence projected the data. Krell Dominion. Estimated strength. Overwhelming. Coalition status. Collapsing. A younger officer frowned. "Sir, the Coalition never activated our mutual defense clauses." Ward nodded. "They didn't trust us to stop once we started." That earned a few grim smiles. Humanity had learned long ago that reputation was a weapon. The galaxy knew humans as relentless, unpredictable, and excessive. That was fine. Fear, after all, saved lives, usually the humans. "Confirm threat classification," Ward ordered. "Confirmed," came the reply. "Krell Dominion exhibits genocidal intent. No evidence of negotiation protocol." Ward's expression hardened. "Then this isn't a war. It's pest control." He turned to the fleet status display. Hundreds of vessels answered his gaze. Battleships, carriers, kinetic lancers, drone tenders, and ships that did not exist in any shared database. Humanity did not build pretty ships. They built ships that survived first contact. "Signal all task groups," Ward said. "This is not a coalition operation. This is a human intervention." No one asked what that meant. Throughout human space, alarms began to sound. Not the panicked shriek of emergency, but the measured chime of readiness. Dry docks unlocked their clamps. Reactor cores spun up. Ammunition feeds were loaded with weapons outlawed under interstellar law, laws written by species who had never evolved on a world where extinction was routine. Coalition observers stationed within human territory watched in stunned silence as the Deathworlders Fleet mobilized with terrifying speed. No Senate debates. No ethical committees. Only execution. "What about escalation limits?" an observer asked hesitantly over an open channel. Ward glanced toward the feed, eyes cold. They waved them when they sent the message. The fleet began to move. As ships aligned for faster-than-light transit, Fleet Historian AI fed contextual data into the command stream, standard practice before major engagements. Not propaganda. Perspective. Humans were born on Earth, a planet where tectonic plates rewrote maps without permission, where storms could flatten cities, where predators evolved specifically to hunt other predators, where disease killed millions before medicine learned to fight back. Survival was not optional. It was inherited. Human war doctrine reflected that truth. They did not fight for dominance or glory. They fought to remove threats so completely that they never returned. Ward watched the final readiness indicators turn green. Navigation, he said. Plot an insertion vector directly into the contested system. The navigation officer hesitated. Sir, that violates every known safe exit parameter. Ward met his gaze. We are not safe species. The fleet vanished into hyperspace. Not in neat formations, but in overlapping waves designed to confuse sensors and overload prediction algorithms. Back at Bastion K-17, Coalition commanders scrambled as long-range sensors screamed warnings. Multiple FDL signatures, an officer shouted. Emergence pattern chaotic. Zalthran leaned forward as the display struggled to update. They're coming out too close, Sevet whispered. They'll collide. Space tore open. Human warships erupted into real space inside the Krell's projected kill zone, so close that several enemy vessels had no time to react. The first human volley was not a warning shot. It was an extinction-level greeting. Kinetic projectiles slammed through Krell shields that had been calibrated for energy weapons. Drone swarms burst apart and reformed mid-flight, adapting to counterfire. Electronic warfare pulses flooded Krell command channels with false data, phantom fleets, and simulated casualties. The Krell armada hesitated. For the first time in the war, they faced an enemy that did not follow the rules of engagement they understood. On the Indomitable, Ward watched the battle unfold in real time. Broadcast on all channels, he ordered. The message went out, untranslated, unadorned. This is Human Fleet Command. You are engaging a Deathworld species. Withdraw now, or be removed. The Krell did not respond. Ward nodded once. Very well, he said. Proceed. Behind him, the Deathworlders Fleet advanced, not to fight the war the Coalition had been losing, but to end it on human terms. The meaning of Deathworlder. The Krell Dominion had never encountered chaos that thought. Their fleets were built around prediction. Battle lines calculated to the smallest deviation, responses mapped before contact was made. Every previous enemy had broken in familiar ways. Panic, retreat, disorganization. The humans did none of those things. From a moment the Deathworlders' fleet emerged, the Krell's mathematical certainty collapsed. Human ships did not hold formation. They surged, split, sacrificed distance for momentum, and turned vulnerability into bait. Where Krell, targeting algorithms, searched for order, they found contradiction. Krell fire control is recalibrating. Sevet reported from Bastion K-17, disbelief in his voice. They cannot lock consistent firing solutions. Zalthran watched as a human cruiser took a direct hit that would have gutted any Coalition vessel. Its forward armor disintegrated. Atmosphere vented into space. The ship kept moving. Damage control teams sealed bulkheads in seconds. Secondary thrusters ignited. The cruiser rammed directly through a Krell frigate, tearing it in half before firing point-blank into another. The human vessel finally broke apart, but not before its sacrifice shattered the Krell's flank. They're using their own losses as weapons, one officer whispered. Yes, Zalthran replied quietly. They always have. The Krell attempted adaptation. Carrier groups redeployed, unleashing bioengineered fighters designed to overwhelm through sheer numbers. Human response was immediate. Drones bloomed from carrier bays like metallic spores, each one autonomous, each one expendable. They learned as they died, feeding data back into the swarm, altering trajectories and weapon frequencies mid-engagement. The battlefield became a storm of debris and fire. On the surface of Krell-occupied Moon Talvesh, human drop pods punched through the atmosphere without deceleration shielding. Coalition doctrine would have called it suicide. Human shock troops emerged from the wreckage. They fought in toxic air, under crushing gravity, against defenders physically stronger than them, and still advanced. Injured soldiers were dragged forward by their comrades. Ammunition was scavenged from fallen enemies. When weapons failed, humans used knives, tools, and bare hands. Krell defenders broadcast terror signals, psychological warfare designed to induce panic and surrender. Human biosigns did not spike. They are ignoring fear stimuli. A Krell commander reported in confusion. No, Ward said from the Indomitable, watching the feed. They're familiar with it. The Krell flagship finally entered the battle, its presence warping space with layered shields and gravity distortion fields. It fired once, annihilating a human destroyer and everything near it. Ward did not flinch. "Mark that vector," he said. "Prepare, feint 7. Fleet Command knew the maneuver well. The Planet Cracker feint was not a weapon. It was a message. Human ships adjusted position, redirecting power to spinal mounts designed for planetary bombardment. Energy signatures spiked, unmistakable and deliberately visible. Zalthrin felt his breath catch. "They're going to destroy Talvesh," Sevet said. "There are billions." "They won't fire," Zalthrin replied. "Not yet." The Krell flagship reacted instantly, breaking formation to interpose itself between the moon and the human line. Krell doctrine demanded protection of controlled worlds at all costs. That was the mistake. Now, Ward said, human ships cut power to their spinal weapons and unleashed everything else. Kinetic lances punched through exposed shield harmonics. Boarding torpedoes slammed into the flagship's hull, embedding and detonating outward. Human Marines flooded the breach. The fighting inside the Krell flagship was brutal and brief. The Krell were stronger, faster, but they fought for dominance. The humans fought for termination. When the flagship's core went critical, Ward authorized evacuation of boarding teams with a 5-second margin. No one complained. The explosion tore through the heart of the Krell armada. Without their command nexus, Krell formations fractured. Retreat signals overlapped with attack commands. Ships collided. Weapons misfired. Coalition sensors struggled to keep up. "It's over," Sevet whispered. Zalthrin watched the remnants of the Krell fleet scatter, some fleeing, others destroyed as they attempted surrender protocols the humans ignored. "They are not pursuing," an officer reported. "They are selecting targets." Ward addressed the coalition on an open channel. "The Krell Dominion will not recover from this engagement," he said evenly. "Any vessel that continues hostile action will be eliminated. This is your final warning." Most of the Krell fled. Those who did not were erased. As the battlefield fell silent, debris drifted where an unstoppable armada had once ruled. Fires burned without sound. Wreckage eclipsed stars. Zalthrin realized then what the term Deathworlder truly meant. It was not where humans came from. It was what they brought with them. After the silence after battle was not peace. It was absence of movement, of resistance, of hope for those who had opposed humanity and lost. Wreckage drifted across the system like the bones of a once-living thing. Fire still burned in vacuum, silent and cold. The Krell armada, which had shattered empires and rewritten borders, no longer existed as a coherent force. Admiral Zalthrin remained on the command deck of Bastion K, 17 long after the last weapon's discharge faded from the sensors. He watched human ships maneuver with practiced efficiency, not in celebration, but in containment. Mines were deployed, patrol patterns established, escape vectors quietly sealed. This was not victory. It was control. Coalition med ships and recovery craft hesitated at the edges of the battlefield, unsure whether they were permitted to enter. No treaty defined this moment. No protocol explained how to coexist with a force that had ended the war in a single, brutal engagement. Human Fleet Command resolved the uncertainty without being asked. Coalition vessels. Admiral Ward's voice transmitted calmly across open channels. "You may commence rescue and recovery operations. Any Krell personnel offering surrender are to be disarmed and detained. Hostile action will be met with immediate termination." The clarity of the order was chilling. and relieving. Zalthrin allowed himself to exhale for the first time in days. Within standard hours, long-range sensors confirmed what many had already suspected. Krell command relays across neighboring systems had gone dark. Automated defense networks shut down without instruction. Supply fleets reversed course or scuttled themselves rather than risk interception. The Krell Dominion, an empire built on certainty and superiority, collapsed not through prolonged war, but through the sudden realization that it could be erased. On the Indomitable, Ward stood before a projected assembly of coalition representatives. Their images flickered, wounded, exhausted, alive. "You have your space back," Ward said. "You have your worlds back. What remains of the Krell will be contained and monitored." "And the cost?" Zalthrin asked carefully. Ward's gaze was steady. "That depends on what you do next." No demand followed. No claim of territory. Humanity did not annex liberated systems. They did not request tribute or influence. They simply remained long enough to ensure the threat was gone. Coalition analysts struggled to understand that. "Why help us?" one representative finally asked. "We excluded you. We feared you." Ward did not deny it. "You called us when extinction was your only alternative. That was enough." His expression hardened slightly. "But understand this. Next time, hesitation will cost more lives." The Deathworlders Fleet withdrew days later, vanishing into deep space as suddenly as it had arrived. They left behind reinforced sensor arrays and encrypted warning beacons, silent reminders of what waited beyond the Coalition's borders. Reconstruction began immediately. Worlds once written off as law sent out their first messages of survival. Refugee convoys returned home under escort. Coalition academies began rewriting their strategic doctrine from the ground up. A new classification was added to the archives. Deathworlder Intervention Scenario. Outcome: absolute. Recommendation: avoid provocation. Zalthrin submitted his final report before retiring from service. In it, he recorded a single conclusion. Humanity does not wage war to win. They wage war to ensure it never needs to be fought again. Across the galaxy, lesser powers took notice. Border tests were canceled. Expansion fleets were recalled. Even the most aggressive civilizations reconsidered their projections when human space appeared on the map. On a distant world, a rising empire debated whether humanity's response had been exaggerated by fear. A proposal was drafted: limited incursion, deniable forces, minimal risk. The document was deleted before transmission. Some lessons did not need repetition. Far beyond Coalition space, the Deathworlders Fleet returned to its patrol routes, scarred ships sliding back into shadow. Humanity did not celebrate the war's end. They simply prepared for the next one. Because on Earth, survival was never assumed. And the galaxy, at last, understood why humans have been classified as Deathworlders. Not because their world was deadly, but because when called they were.